Here's one change I would make for every single DBD killer to make them more fun, interesting, or viable. Artist. Make it so that she doesn't spook any crows that are sitting around on the map, and she can press a button while looking at a crow to suck the crow into her hand and gain another charge, but it still can't go over the 3 max charges. I feel like Artist just needs to be connected with these crows somehow, and this is the only thing I could really think of that's not borderline OP. For Blight, just obviously rework his overpowered add-ons, and also fix the sliding off hitboxes. Those are so unbelievably frustrating when you're playing as the Blight, and from a survivor's perspective as well, going against a good Blight that knows every single hitbox that can take advantage of this, it's just kind of unfun because you did what you were supposed to do to counter Blight, but you got hit regardless. I know there's going to be a lot of Blight mains out there that don't want this fixed because they've learned it and they take advantage of it, but for simplicity's sake and for consistency's sake, it should definitely be fixed. For Bubba, I'm going to go with preventing double hits on endurance. I love doing this as a Bubba, especially if they like dead hard or something, but being able to down somebody off of the unhook and just tunnel them straight away just by using your chainsaw shouldn't be possible. So maybe make it so that if you hit somebody with endurance, it just cancels your chainsaw. Moving on to Pinhead. Pinhead's pretty balanced in my opinion. I just think the main problem with him is the kind of solo queue aspect of him. It's really hard to stay on top of the chain hunt just because you don't have any communication. So my proposed change is to have the aura of the closest survivor to the box be revealed to all survivors during the chain hunt. So this would just kind of give the survivors a little bit of information on who's closest to the box while the chain hunt is going on, so they can see like, oh, that person's going for the box. I don't need to go across the map to try to get it. I think that's a little bit of info would help out solo queue players a lot. Moving on to Clown. Honestly, it's just removing the nauseous screen effects and reworking it into something else. I know that's kind of the entire point of the kit, but it's just caused so many accessibility issues and it's just annoying. Like, it's just annoying to look at. So I think if they were able to implement some sort of creative way to still stay true to Clown's ability without having it be like overbearingly nauseating, I think that'd be good. For Deathslinger, I'm gonna say some sort of base kit Eerie coin. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but something to reward going for long shots. I think this will incentivize more Deathslingers to go for cool shots, which is much more fun for the killer and the survivors alike.
Hello, Editing Kyle here. I completely forgot about Demogorgon, and I'm currently home editing on a really bad laptop, so this is extremely painful. But the change I would make for Demogorgon is to make him have more stealth. I really want him to have more stealth add-ons that can kind of change up his playstyle a little bit. Currently, the add-ons that we have right now for stealth are like kind of decent, but they're just way too short to actually be viable. So either buffing those or reworking them to create more of a stealth playstyle would be great.
For Doctor, I just want to see more interesting illusionary mechanics. I think this is the coolest part of his kit, and being able to have something like illusionary generators or moving illusionary doctors or even illusionary tiles where it may look like a TL and then as soon as you go inside of it, it changes to a jungle gym or something. I think something like that would be really sick and would make playing against him a lot more interesting. For Dredge, I just want him to be faster paced. He is so unbelievably boring to play in my opinion. So whether that be teleporting faster, quicker like movements or quicker cooldowns, whatever it takes to make him feel faster paced and make him feel much more smooth would be nice. For Pyramid Head, this one's pretty obvious. Just make actually useful and creative add-ons. There's so many creative things that you could do with his kit and with his add-ons. It's really sad to see only 3 of his add-ons being remotely useful. I'd also want to add base kit endurance out of a cage. I know the entire point of the cage is that there's no perks that apply to them, but I do think that base kit endurance needs to be included just so that the survivor in the cage can't just get instantly downed. For Ghostface, I'd want him to have an additional benefit to crouching since it's slower and harder to see. Crouching just isn't really a mechanic that's utilized enough, and I just want there to be more of a reason to use his crouching ability. If you guys have any ideas, let me know in the comments below. I can't really think of a creative way to make his crouching better, but I just want the crouching to be more of an integral part of this killer rather than it just being used for like teabags. For Chucky, make it so that you have to manually press spacebar to scamper while slice and dicing. Currently, it automatically does it if you run into a window or a pallet, but sometimes you don't actually want to scamper because you're trying to do some sort of mind game while sliding off of a wall. I find the automatic scampering to be a very annoying feature, and I just wish that you could change it to manual. For Hag, just prevent traps from being placed near hook survivors. This is just the boring way of playing Hag, and I think if you disallowed traps from being placed like right near the survivors on the hook, it would just mitigate that playstyle and make her much more fun to play against. For Hillbilly, just make his power more forgiving. The amount of clutter in indoor maps nowadays just makes him so boring to play as. So I'd want him to have a shorter bump time, make the bump angle more generous, like that one brown add-on I think, and rework his add-ons so that they're more useful. Make him just feel better to play like he used to. For Huntress, I think she's perfectly fine. Obviously there's like the hitbox issue, but that's more ping than Huntress herself. So I would just fix some of the hitboxes on like the actual map geometry where it looks like for certain objects you can throw hatchets over them, but you can't, like certain fences and stuff. I'd also make her maybe like get quote unquote tired after holding the same hatchet out for 5 or more seconds, just to kind of prevent those camping Huntresses that just keep their hatchet out while not affecting anything else. Moving on to Knight, I just want his guards to be less about chasing survivors and more about their unique characteristics. So make them weaker for chasing, but better better at their specific effects. For Legion, I want them to give them an add-on that completely changes the way they play, kind of like Myers add-ons. I think Legion is a little bit too straightforward of a killer, and an add-on to make them more unique and more interesting and kind of switch up their power a little bit, I think would be a nice change of pace for playing as and against this killer. For Wesker, I think he's pretty balanced except for two things. One is what literally everyone talks about that needs to be changed, which is where your infection meter doesn't go up on hook or whatever it was, just so that you can't be tunneled as easily. But besides that, I would just personally want to see it more obvious when he's putting away his tentacle, so he can't just zone you and put you into a 50-50 situation based on very little info. Yeah, like it's obvious when the tentacle's actually going into his arm, but by that point you have about a second and a half to get to a resource, and usually he'll be able to hit you regardless. So if they can figure out some sort of way to make it more clear to the survivor if he's going to do his second dash or if he's going to put away his tentacle, I think that'll fix my only annoyance with this character. For Nemesis, I originally had a hot take for a change, which would be that zombies don't down survivors while the survivors are in a chase. And the reason I wanted this is because I think uncountable situations are the worst possible thing for DBD, and for any game really. That's just basic game design. But that's kind of just a design flaw in the killer itself, and I think changing that would just kind of ruin the entire point of the zombies, besides the information. So my suggested change instead would be to make tier 1 weaker, but make tier 3 stronger. So make it a bit more like Myers, where he's really bad in tier 1, but much better in tier 3. And then you could balance out how long it takes to get to tier 3 depending on how powerful it is. Because really, the difference between tier 1 and tier 2 is much more significant than the difference between tier 1 and tier 3. So I just want the tiers to matter more. For Freddy, I would just make it so just like Doctor, he would have more dream interactions besides just the dream pallets and the dream snares. I think it'd be cool to have fake hex totems or fake generators or even fake survivors. I feel like there's a lot of really unique dream interactions that you could do with this killer. For Nurse, just allow her to blink through the outer walls if her blink destination is within the map. There's certain walls on Suffocation Pit that you physically cannot blink through because the game detects it as like going out of bounds. But if the destination of your blink is inside of the map, you should be able to blink through it. This is one of my biggest annoyances while playing as Nurse. I know it's small, but it'll be a really nice quality of life change. For Oni, just remove the ability to do those insane like 180-degree flicks. I think you should definitely be able to have like the 90-degree flicks, but the super fast flicks around corners is just kind of not fair to the survivors. I love hitting these. They're really satisfying from the killer's perspective, but to be fair to the survivors, if they're able to get around the corner like the Oni's counterplay is supposed to be, I think they should be rewarded for doing that. For Onryo, I would just want them to make it more visually and auditorially obvious when she's manifesting or demanifesting. Currently, it's a little bit hard to tell which mode she's in because she blinks in and out of existence when she's demanifested. So I would just figure out some sort of way to make it more obvious. Like for Wraith, he has his entire bell and is like burning up in flames and stuff when he's going in and out. And for Onryo, she's just kind of like staticky and moves her hands a little bit. So just make it more obvious. For Pig, buff her stealth. A majority of the time, her stealth is more detrimental than it is useful. And just like with Ghostface's crouch, I'd want to see her crouch being used more than just for her ability. I think we need more stealth-based killers in this game, so buffing her stealth would be nice. For Plague, this was hard because I think she's a very balanced killer. So I would just say give her more interesting add-ons. Like there's that brown one that makes the infections on objects last longer, but then she's not allowed to infect survivors. Stuff like that completely changes her playstyle, I think would make her more interesting. For Myers, just nerf or rework the Tombstone add-ons. They're incredibly broken and everybody knows that. So I'm pretty sure this was on the roadmap for next year, so that is great to hear. For Singularity, I've played as this killer and against this killer maybe like twice in my life, so I have no idea, honestly. I would maybe make it so that EMPs are less prevalent overall, or if the EMPs are fine as they are, maybe just make it so that he can shoot further, because it's annoying to like try to be shooting a wall, but you're not close enough, so you keep having to shoot it like 5 times until it finally sticks. For Skull Merchant, I don't even know. Like she was just terribly designed from a fundamental level, so there's not much you can really change about her besides completely reworking her. So maybe just like make her drones less lethal and more informational or utility based, like aura reading or transportations or making the survivors scream, etc. Whatever's the most fun, because I think injuring survivors and making them exposed just makes this killer really boring, and that's what turns her into a really boring whole W killer or a really boring 3-gen killer. So we just need to figure out a way to kind of get away from that style. For Spirit, make it so that if you step in her husk, it kicks her out of her phase, similar to Dredge. I think having this little bit of counterplay would make Spirit much more fun to play against. The problem with Spirit is that whenever she phases, it's just a 50-50 of whether or not you survive or you go down. So I think having an additional thing to do to counter her will kind of make these phase chases much more interesting. For Trapper, just give him all traps at the start, please. Like, I don't know why they haven't done this yet. He has been one of the worst killers, if not the worst killer, for so long. So please just give him all the traps. And also maybe give survivors a skill check during the disarm animation, and if they miss it, they accidentally set off the trap and injure themselves. Because really, if you're playing Trapper and you're going against a Survive with friends, they're just gonna have one person following you around and disabling traps all the time. So if there's a chance that they can miss a skill check and become injured, it would kind of nerf that counter a little bit. For Trickster, just make him less spammy and more skill-based based. Again, just like Skull Merchant, he's kind of just poorly designed fundamentally, so it's a little bit hard to figure out what to do. But the reason he's so much more boring than like his Huntress counterpart is because his power doesn't give survivors many options in chase, so there's very little counterplay. So playing as him is just very unsatisfying because you're not interacting with the survivors, you're just holding a button and then they go down no matter what. And playing as the survivor is obviously boring, everybody knows that. So make it more interesting or make it more complex. I don't know what you could do. If you guys have ideas, please let me know in the comments. I can't think of anything creative, but we just need to stray away from that spammy nature of him because that's the entire reason why he doesn't feel fun to play as or play against. Obviously that's subjective, but most people can agree that he is not a healthy killer for the game. For twins, honestly, I would just give Victor footsteps like Chucky. I think this was a fantastic implementation for a short killer on Chucky, and I think giving that to Victor too will help a lot. For Wraith, just bring back Lightburn. Wraith is one of my favorite killers to play as, and I think the Lightburn mechanic made him more interesting to play. And it's also obviously very easy to counter once you know what you're doing, because you just go behind a wall and you don't continue uncloaking if they're trying to burn you. But it can be used in your advantage because survivors get tunnel visioned on trying to burn you that you can get so many free hits out of it. I think having unique mechanics like this made DBD more interesting, and just removing that kind of just takes the soul out of the game. I know a lot of Wraith players didn't like the Lightburn mechanic, but if you just learn how to counter it, it's really not that bad and you can turn it into your advantage. And for Xenomorph, just nerf his tail attack. Everyone knows that the tail attack is basically uncounterable, so just make it so that you have to like charge it up a little bit more or something, just to give more interactivity between the survivor and the killer. Both killers and survivors enjoy when they're interacting with each other because that's the entire point of this game, and I really don't think there should be any killer in the game that can just down you no matter what you do. I thought they would have learned their lesson with Deathslinger and Pyramid Head because those two were exactly the same as Xenomorph, where they were uncounterable in chase, and they nerfed both of those powers and now they're more interactive, so I have hope that they'll do the same for Xenomorph. If you want to see some hilarious and completely absurd add-on ideas I came up with for every single DBD killer, check out this video on screen now. Also, drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and comment down below what changes you would want to see to this game.